Happy Friday, fantasy fans. We are one more week closer to official puck drop on the upcoming season, but we got a little bit more homework to do on last year's fantasy draft. We're wrapping up the 4th-round. Brent Burns, Jake Guentzel, Elias Pettersson, and a whole bunch of other fantasy studs that you want to keep your eye on. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for joining us for the Friday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steel Roden. On this side of the mic, it is your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day, even throughout the summer. I hope y'all been feeling this summer content, and we're going to continue to do what we've been doing, breaking down the 2022 Fantasy Hockey Draft, a little bit of a rewind, Steel. We're finishing off that 4th round, and now it's starting to get real serious because I think you and I have talked a lot about back end of the draft, middle rounds. Now we're really going to start looking at players that either should or shouldn't be in these top 3-4 rounds. Lots of spicy names to get to on today's show. We're going to keep it short and sweet, but I'm going to turn it right over to you because maybe of all the players on this list, not maybe, definitely the oldest. What are you doing next year with Brent Burns? Still a very valuable fantasy asset.
Very valuable, and he's an excellent fantasy hockey team defenseman. I think any team, any GM out there that can land him as a fourth or even a third pair defenseman is very happy with their selection. Finished just outside the top 100 for fantasy points this past year. He was top 15 amongst the defensemen for fantasy points as well. So he still brings the value. He scores goals, has 18 this past year. He records points, had 61 in 82 games. Loves to shoot the puck from the blue line. We know he likes doing that, and he brings a ton of value on the power play with that as well. I think where his fantasy value starts to fall off, especially now at 38, 39 years old, are those other peripheral stats, the blocks and the hits have fallen down significantly. And that's why his fantasy value isn't amongst the top 10 defensemen anymore in the league at this point in the stage of his career. So, drafted 42nd overall in our fantasy hockey league. His ADP says 86.1, which I believe is way closer to the round where I believe Burns should fall to. I still think that he'll probably fall to the 9th or 10th round. Again, still a ton of fantasy value, but there's younger defensemen and more skilled defensemen out there.
And you know me with the time on ice number. It's really indicative of where usually either, a young player who's growing or a veteran player who's starting to fade a little bit. And this is no disrespect to Brent Burns or his overall fantasy quality, but you got to pay attention to it as a fantasy GM, right? Last year, down to, I think it was 23 minutes in ice time per night when closer to his average, the years before, 25, 26, eating a ton of minutes. And honestly, at his age, of course, 23 minutes a night at 38 years old. And yeah, he is 38. I got you on that one, Steele. It's still a lot of minutes, but maybe just remember that a lot of his value was tied to his ability to just be on the ice all the time. And we know how balanced the Carolina Hurricanes blue line is. They bring in Dmitry Orlov as well. He's going to eat some of those minutes, that's for sure. So just remember that when you're going out to draft Brent Burns, of course, he's still going to bring those shots and that fantasy, offensive fantasy value. But you mentioned it with the peripherals, and be wary of those minutes going down, because that also means his points go down. That's just how it goes, Steele. But at the end of the day, I'd still be happy to be taking Brent Burns as, like you said, my second or even last D-man, maybe even a bit higher depending on the format, because offensive D-men are really hard to come by.
Yeah, and maybe even halfway through the season, you're able to facilitate a trade to the GM that actually drafted him. I actually did that as well. I believe I acquired Andrei Svechnikov, who is also on this list as well, and Brent Burns in a different fantasy league. Acquired those two, and they really did help my fantasy hockey team for the remainder of the season. I was struggling a bit in that one. A player, a forward who is 10 years younger than Brent Burns, Jake Guentzel of the Pittsburgh Penguins, falling in at 41st overall in our fantasy league. And I love this player a lot. I believe I drafted him in a different fantasy league as well. He's a strong goal scorer, 36 goals, 73 points in 78 games. He's terrific on the power play. I think the 4th and 5th round is exactly where Jake Guentzel should fall. Depending on what this team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, will shape out to be at the start of the season, it looks like Kyle Dubas has done a phenomenal job, or a pretty good job so far with his first month and a half with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's made some crucial adjustments. He's re-signed a few guys as well. He's obviously got to work with the cap space, but Jake Guentzel on the last year of his contract, $6 million. So he's looking to cash in on a long-term deal and for as much money as possible.
Is there a finite rule of thumb where a guy is on his contract year that he produces? Absolutely not. But with Jake Guentzel, I'm willing to take the risk that this guy goes off this year to try and cement his payday. You can't hate that angle, Steele, especially when it's a guy who's got it done. And let's not forget how well he plays on Sidney Crosby's wing. That's where it comes down to with me. If Sidney Crosby does what he did last year, Jake Guentzel is a very, very valuable fantasy asset. We've talked a lot about the Pittsburgh Penguins, so I'm going to leave that alone for a second. But at the end of the day, they were on the second half. They were 16th in team scoring last year, 261 goals. Their offense isn't exactly a juggernaut. They can score. They bring in some moves. Lots of question marks with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I think that might be leaving some GMs a little bit wary of taking Jake Guentzel. I wouldn't be. He's proven that he can get it done regardless of who is there, but it ties to Sidney Crosby. I wouldn't even hate trying to get Sid and Guentzel if you possibly could, because those nights that Pittsburgh goes off for a bunch of goals, they're going to be at the heart of it. Jake Guentzel, definitely still very valuable offensively. And at the end of the day, Steele, if Tristan Jarry can stay healthy, there's lots of ifs with this Pittsburgh Penguins team. Chris Letang can stay healthy. If some of these moves that come in and pan out, too many ifs usually might not lead to a good thing in the standings, but it still might hold a whole ton of fantasy value. We're going to continue to talk about that with Elias Pettersson, Svechnikov, Ekblad, Stutz. I might have to revisit that side bet that Steele lost back in the offseason. We'll see how it goes, but we know how it goes with our friends from AG1. Today's episode is brought to you by AG1, the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. Steele and I drink it literally every day, multiple times a day. We gave AG1 a try mainly because we were done with all the 100 pills, supplements, routines. AG1 in the morning, at night, 1 scoop in water. That's all you need to support your all-around health. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support you every single day. It replaces your multivitamin, your probiotic, all in one simple, drinkable habit. It's a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food source nutrients that's raising the standard for quality in the supplement game. You've got to be checking out our friends from AG1, because if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplemental routine, you've got to be trying AG1 to get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go over to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1/NHL network. You got to be checking it out today.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your favorite team from all 4 major sports leagues, including the NCAA. It's your team every single day. And thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip Livingstone and your boy Steele Roden. Thank you so much. Make sure you hit that subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all that love and support out there. Continuing, though, on the conversation of the 2022 draft rewind, we will get to Tim Stutzle. We'll have to eat the crow on that one. You won the side bet there. We'll get to that at the end of this episode. But another player that you were right about, Elias Pettersson, coming in at 40th overall in our fantasy hockey league. And I got a lot to say on this as well, but I'll throw it over to you, because this is also one of your boys who you were really high on coming into the season.
Hey, and look, what's even more impressive perhaps about his season last year is just all of the different situations. Yeah, drama on ice, off ice, Bo Horvat, Jimmy Rutherford's torture of a press conference, multiple trades, fans upset. And this guy just went out there and, not quietly for Canucks fans and maybe not quietly in more dedicated hockey circles, but quietly went out there and put up his best season of his career, one of the better seasons in the league. He was 18th in Hart voting, 8th in Lady Byng, 7th in Selke. He's now on the radar, I think, officially as a very serious and potent fantasy offensive threat. And we're sounding like some broken records here because we're talking about some guys that can put up points. But 102 points last year, Steele, 39 goals. And I'll hit you with this take because you know how high I am on this player. I actually think, and I know I just had his shot total up, 257 shots last year. I say shoot that biscuit more and see that goal total go even higher.
Yeah, he's definitely a player to keep an eye on to reach that 50 goal mark for next season.
Thank you.
He was 11 away. He had 39 goals, like you said, this past year. But again, if he continues to shoot that puck like the rest of the players, like McDavid, like Matthews, like McKinnon, 50 is well in reach for Elias Pettersson. And you were right. The first thing after this season was all wrapped up. And the first thing I have here on my notes is he's a first-round draft pick. First-round draft pick, no denying that whatsoever anymore. Debatably, even a top 5 draft pick at this point. It is debatable. Obviously, it's interchangeable with a few different guys and league specifics. But it is debatable if he's a top 5 draft pick after the season he just had. He just finished top 5 for fantasy points in majority of fantasy leagues. Like you said, 39 goals, 102 points in his 5th season in the NHL. Incredible on the power play. But the thing I love now is that they're actually starting to utilize him on the penalty kill too. He had 5 shorthanded goals this past year. And like you said, 7th in voting for the Selke Trophy. So I think that's starting to showcase the improvement in the focus on his two-way game, becoming one of the better centermen in the league right now. His ADP was 53.5. So he was going even later than what he was taken in our fantasy draft. But yeah, he is without a doubt a first-round draft pick in fantasy hockey leagues.
I like how strongly you've come around on him. I don't know, without a doubt. Top 15, I'm loving it. It just depends on the format. I know I sound like a broken record like that. It's hard to speak in these finites, but I love this player. And also, he's starting to bring those peripherals, Steele. 74 hits, 89 block shots. For a guy who brings that much finesse, I don't even hate 16 penalty minutes because if he does have one of those nights where it's 2 or 4 PIMs and a bunch of points, like it's those nights that you jump ahead or get back into the league. So I love it. But at the end of the day, I also love the fact that he's going to play more alongside Andrei Kuzmenko. And we've talked a little bit about Kuzmenko. He fits seamlessly into the NHL. Maybe we'll see a regression from him overall in points. I don't know. I haven't even thought about Kuzmenko. I just saw that they played so much and so well together. I love that combination. And say what you will about the Vancouver Canucks, and there are some things to say, I think they're still going to be fine scoring goals. I think the issue is obviously on the other end and keeping the puck out of their net. So this is really good things for a guy who also steals, and I'll leave it at this. He's just starting to scratch the surface. He's just starting to get really comfortable as an NHL star.
He is just starting to scratch the surface. He went from 68 points the year from that, pretty much doubled it to 102 points. And I think we can expect the Vancouver Canucks to be better. I do expect Thatcher Demko to be more like himself, like we've seen in the past. I think he will be more focused and more mentally ready to start the season, unlike the year prior. Defensively, with the moves that Vancouver has made so far, I think defensively they've gotten better as well. I believe Quinn Hughes is the only remaining defenseman from last season. They've pretty much cleaned house on the blue line and just rebuilt that up this offseason so far. Still a couple more moves to be made, but Vancouver Canucks will be interesting to see where their players fall in next year's fantasy draft. Andrei Svechnikov, though, falling in at 39th overall in the Fantasy Hockey League. I like this player a lot. Very strong player. 23 years old, so still a lot of development left in his game, but he is great out there. I believe, and I think he will be, a consistent 30-goal scorer in the NHL, 70-point player in the NHL, and the Banger League beauty starting to come out again as well. 71 penalty minutes, 140 hits. He did only play 64 games this past year as well. He had 55 points, so obviously the point total was down because of those missed games. I forget the injury he had, but I know it was pretty serious.
I forget as well.
I forget the injury he had, but it was a very serious injury before before the playoffs started. So it took him out of the playoffs, which really hurt the Carolina Hurricanes in the second round. This might be a little bit of a stretch to say, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
To me, Svechnikov is like the third Tkachuk brother playing in the NHL.
I don't hate it.
You have Matthew Tkachuk, who's the top. He goes first round, no doubt. Brady Tkachuk, who's second, and he debatably goes first round, probably second round on average.
Very close.
And then Svechnikov is the third brother and goes fourth, fifth round. I think exactly in the fourth round, maybe not at the early stages, the later ones, but Svechnikov, fourth, even early fifth round, that's exactly where you should be placed. Take into consideration the injury he just had. That's
just it. Yeah.
I think it's the first time in his career he had a very, very serious injury. But when he's on the ice, he is a strong player to have on your fantasy team.
And I think also it goes under the radar for some fantasy GMs out there that he does also bring those hits. Like, that's a really, really impressive guy, because sometimes when you see someone who we know can do it offensively, try and muck it up, try and mix it up, try and do the Tkachuk thing, because there's not many players who can balance that physicality and that edge with also while still being effective offensively. He's up there for me. So I'm glad that you brought the Tkachuks. Now that I'm thinking of how many good players, I'm thinking even more so maybe Pettersson is outside that top 10, but we're going to break all of that down for the upcoming draft. Don't you worry. But at the end of the day, Steele, I love these kinds of players that can bring it offensively and physically. And, 23 goals, 32 assists last year in 64 games for Svechnikov. He was so critical to their success. I think we both saw that offensive punch and a little bit of that physicality, just not in the teeth of the attack of the Carolina Hurricanes. And I think that did end up really hurting them. I'm excited to see if he can come back from health. And lastly, that injury caveat is going to maybe back a few fantasy GMs off of him. And from everything that I've read and everything that people are reporting, he is going to be 100% healthy and good to go. Yeah. Will there be some rust? Will there maybe be a slow start? I could maybe see it, considering how much time he's missed on that NHL pace, but I'm not going to let him slide much farther than you mentioned 5th round. If he's still out there in the 5th or 6th round, I'm grabbing him 100%.
In a full season, we could potentially see over 200 hits. He likes to shoot the puck as well, over 200 shots, or maybe even over 250 shots. When he's healthy and ready to go. I wouldn't wait too long. Obviously he is 23 years old. He's still a very young guy, so he should be ready to go, like you said, fully healthy moving forward. We will get to Aaron Ekblad. This was my pick in the 4th round. That did not pan out the way I hoped. Aaron Ekblad and your boy, Timmy Stutzle, to wrap up this episode. But thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you hit that subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all that love and all the support you show us on this podcast. Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when all of our episodes drop. So thank you so much for tuning in with your boy Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden. Aaron Ekblad was my boy in the 4th round, though, 38th overall.
Tough one.
And this is really where it hurt me in the fantasy hockey league. I still ended up making it work. I ended up doing pretty well. But his ADP was actually 37.1. So I was exactly right on the money pretty much on where to take him. The peripheral stats were there: 80 blocks, 80 hits, over 200 shots. He had 68 penalty minutes, 21 power play points, but the overall aggressiveness offensively, like we've seen in the past, and just being able to finish those opportunities was nowhere to be found this past year with the Florida Panthers. Had 38 points in 71 games compared to 57 points in 61 games the year prior. Yeah. So for me, it was just one of those picks that didn't quite work out. I also think you were very right that I took him too early. I think I could have probably waited 2 or 3 more rounds, but it's just one of those picks that didn't work out.
And it happens. And here we are airing out our dirty laundry for all of the internet to see. Steele, our mistakes are being, real focused in on, but that's okay, because not only is it going to help us learn, hopefully it's helping our listeners learn. And let's not forget, Aaron Ekblad was a first overall draft pick. For whatever reason, say what you will about the other picks that could have gone first overall. that brings a certain jazz to a player's name and his attention. And sometimes you have to separate those. Is he still bringing a ton of fantasy value? Is he still relevant? Of course. And D-men are really, really tough to fill. 57 points a year before and 61 games, like you mentioned. I think you reached a little bit. Unfortunately, also, he got hurt again. It didn't pan out. We could have been having a very different conversation if he even repeated his previous pace. Because, sure, maybe it would have been still slightly early. But if he put up 60 points in 82 games or even 50 points, I don't even think that's that bad of a move because all those other peripherals that you mentioned. What's interesting also is his opportunity with the Florida Panthers. They now have had some step-out moments. Brandon Montour, we've talked about that at length. Gustav Forsling, maybe another year. His minutes are going to start to go down. I think that's a fact. Is he still important? For sure. I would just again say, if your league is starting to go deep in that defenseman category, I'm grabbing Ekblad in like maybe the 8th, maybe the 9th. It just all really depends, Steele, because in leagues where those banger categories count, and it's a deeper league, Ekblad's value goes up because there's really not a ton of guys that bring everything to the game that he does. Injuries, though, huge, and his opportunity in Florida are going to make me wary here of this guy.
That is the main concern with Aaron Ekblad. Those injuries have just followed him around every single season, and that hurts the fantasy value. That's always something you got to keep in the back of your mind. Number 37, though, 37th overall on this list, Timmy Stutzle, your boy. Again, another side bet that you were correct about, I believe. You were right about Elias Pettersson. You were right about Timmy Stutzle. I'll let you take this one for now.
The projection was 80 points, and it was still bold headed into the season, like 58 points in 79 games the year before. And I think you probably would have been in the majority of people taking the under 80.5 points. So if he has an 80-point season, you still win your bet. It's been a while since you and I have talked about bets, but that's actually a pretty smart one. I would have been in the minority taking the over there, but it panned out. And I think now the whole fantasy realm is all over Tim Stutzle. There is going to be no mistaking the fact that he is now a bona fide 85, 90-point threat. I could see 100-point steal if he stays healthy and that Ottawa Senators team is successful. It has a lot to do with him. And it has a lot to do with that offensive unit. We're not going to go down that path because everyone who's watching hockey and listening to this show knows that the offense in Ottawa is elite. Tim Stutzle is a 3rd overall draft pick, 39 goals last year, 51 assists, 54 penalty minutes, though, Steele.
Yeah.
This guy is starting to bring value, 114 hits. We know he likes to throw his body around. To me, he has catapulted himself into the top 2 rounds.
Yep.
Maybe latest 3rd round, but I would say he shouldn't be going that late. I'm saying first 2.5 rounds for sure.
No later than the 3rd round. If we end up letting Timmy Stutzle as a group in the fantasy hockey community, let him slide as to an ADP of what he's at right now, then we've done something wrong.
We're slipping.
He definitely deserves to be going in the 2nd round, early 3rd round at the latest. Like you said, even the Banger League beauty now in him, 54 penalty minutes, 114 hits. I can see the physicality.
228 shots. He does it all.
The physicality will just continue to grow in this player. He's great on the power play, has great touch, has great finish.
Yes.
I'm there with you. 2nd round easily for me for Timmy Stutzle after the season he just had. We will continue the list like this, maybe get into the round 3 for next week on Monday's episode. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when you can find all of our content. Have a great day out there. Have a great weekend as well. Good luck with all your summer bets, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.